Hey everyone, it's Bethany, founder of Oceanview Marketing. Welcome back to Failing Forward. Today's guest is someone I instantly connected with when I heard her story. Lauren Perna is the CEO of Lauren Perna Communications, and she's also a passionate mental health advocate. In this episode, Lauren opens up about navigating anxiety and depression throughout her life, and how those challenges ultimately pushed her to leave the corporate world and start her own business. If you've ever felt stuck or doubted whether you had what it takes to work for yourself, I promise this conversation will leave you feeling seen and inspired. Let's get into it. Hello, welcome to Failing Forward. Today we have Lauren Perna, CEO and head writer of Lauren Perna Communications. Welcome to the podcast, Lauren.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's so great to have you. All right, let's get right into it. So I know that you have mentioned that you are a mental health advocate and that has played a big role in your corporate history as well as heading into entrepreneurship. Would you mind sharing a little bit about the type of mental illness that you've dealt with in your life?
Yeah. So I would say that I have probably had anxiety since the womb. It is just something I always remember dealing with, but especially as a young child, it really came into prevalence for me. And then as I grew older, I discovered a depression diagnosis as well. And that really kind of came to fruition in high school, which is typically happens for women. And then for the last 41 years of my life, I would say that those two have been a lovely mix. And for me, I would say the anxiety probably is a little bit louder of a voice than the depression. It just really kind of colors everything I do. And I feel like a lot of times I have let the anxiety take over, which then leads to depression because you are setting these kind of really high expectations for yourself that are just unattainable. And then when you don't achieve them, you feel bad about yourself. So I think that it's really led to I always used to say, like, I had a lifetime of low confidence. That has changed over the last few years. So I'm really happy about that. Yeah.
That's so great. So can you share a little bit about, I know you mentioned when you were in the corporate world that brought some significant challenges and prompted you to head into an entrepreneurial journey. Could you share a little bit about those challenges specific to the corporate world and then what happened once you made the leap into entrepreneurship?
Yeah. So I was in the corporate world. I'm an old lady. So I was in the corporate world, like the 2000s through 2018. And so this was before the pandemic. So mental health was very much hush hush, under the radar. No one talked about it, especially like in my early years in the corporate world. The story I always tell is, like, I remember I had therapy appointments and I kept telling the boss that I had physical therapy. Like, I was just so embarrassed. And they gave me such a hard time about physical therapy that I was like, yeah, there's no way I can even mention actual therapy. And so that was like, early 2000s. And then slowly, as I grew in my career, it became very clear that my high anxiety, my high emotion was just not welcomed in the corporate world. I felt very alienated. I felt like I was always like wearing a mask. And then I got a job, my longtime job, which was a nonprofit, which was definitely a much more, I would say, lax experience than the other corporate jobs that I had. So I didn't feel as contained as I had been in other roles, but that slowly changed over the years as I became more and more unhappy. And it was truly nothing to do with like the company or the people or anything. It was more to do with the fact that I was just bored. It truly was a dream job for me. It really encompassed everything that I loved doing. It was very multifaceted, which is me. I'm very creative, but I also am very organized. So it gave me that opportunity to do a little bit of marketing, communications, and until one day I just kind of realized, like, wow, this is it. I've like found my ideal job. Now what? And from there on out, it just kind of like went tumbling down. I like a landslide into deep, dark depression and high anxiety. And that's when I, discovered that Okay, so we're still not talking about mental health. And even you could even be in a great environment like I was in, and the mental health piece is just still a struggle. It's still really hard to talk about. So I decided to leave and take some time off and really get back to myself, think about, where I wanted to go from there. I always like to think of it as, like it's pretty much like a self-fulfilling prophecy, because I was so depressed and anxious that as I was trying to find another job to leave, I was probably not portraying myself in the best light because I was just so anxious and depressed and trying to get out of there. And, you know, so of course I wasn't getting any jobs, which made me feel worse. So eventually I just decided to take a break. And at the time, yes, I felt very brave and excited to take a break. I also felt pretty ashamed that I was taking this break, and people really at the time, they just weren't doing that. Like I said, this was before the pandemic, when mental health really has, kind of shifted to the forefront. So I was really embarrassed and ashamed that this was like the choice I had to make. So, but I spent a year off really just trying to figure out what I was doing. I did a bunch of contract jobs, and I really thought like, all right, I know I want to go into entrepreneurship, but I want to take one more year in the corporate world to feel confident in my skill set. That did not work out, and the pandemic happened. So when that job didn't work out and the pandemic happened, I really just kind of saw it as a sign from the universe that I just got to do the damn thing. And that is when I was like, all right, I'm just going to, start my own business. I have an incredibly supportive husband who's also self-employed. So I knew that we could, I could make it work. And I spent the first year just kind of like cobbling together a business, and soon enough, I realized that having my own business, being able to make my own schedule, take the clients that I want to take the time that I want to take if things are, going bad, and also just doing the work that I feel most passionate about, that combination really was ideal for me as an anxious little depressed lady. So I was slowly able to come into myself, and I was also able to find therapists that I could work with during the day, try new medicines without worrying about side effects at work. So I really kind of found this perfect concoction of therapy, medicine, work, and self care that I really can manage because I work for myself and I don't have to be dictated by any kind of schedule from someone else.
That's great. I think there's a lot of really good nuggets in there, of pieces of advice for people who may be going through similar feelings or experiences. When you first reached out to me, your story really resonated with me because over the course of the last 5, 6 years, I've had off and on experiences with some anxiety and some little form of depression as well. Mine started out in about 2019 when I started doing IVF, to have our first baby. And I had never experienced this before. And it was hormone related, the medicines related to IVF and stuff really just threw me into a tailspin. And I was in corporate. It was before the pandemic, working in an office. And I remember this moment where I had taken a medicine that I had a very bad reaction to, and it actually caused panic attacks. And oh, yes, wonderful. Exactly what you want to be experiencing when you're in a corporate office. And I remember not being able to breathe, not really realizing what was happening. I had to go hide in a conference room, like one of those phone rooms, and just hope it passed. It was terrible. And so I know that that's a little bit different. It's hormone induced, but I relate.
Feeling is still the
The
same.
feeling is the same. And I think so many people, whether it's medicine induced, hormone induced, genetics, whatever the cause is, entrepreneurs can just beat themselves up, and or pre-entrepreneurs, people who want to go into entrepreneurship but are afraid. So, you know, along those lines, as you were starting to think about heading into entrepreneurship, what were did you have any hesitations, or, how did you feel making that decision?
Oh my God. Yeah. So many hesitations. I mean, I have to say though, I do come from a long line of entrepreneurs. My dad owned his own business. My grandfathers both own their own business. And like I said, my husband owns his own business. So for me, it wasn't foreign. And I felt pretty confident that like this was going to be my path. I saw, the joy my dad had growing up in owning his own business. And I wanted that too. I just didn't want to do what he did. He's a financial planner. So that was not my wheelhouse. And I saw the joy that my husband has, working for himself, making his own schedule. And I knew I wanted that. And I knew I could do it. I think probably for me, it was less about the concept of entrepreneurship and more the hesitation was in the skill set. Because I had come from such a multifaceted background. Like I said, I did a little bit of everything. It's a nonprofit. I did marketing, comms, events, operations, customer service, took out the trash. No, I'm just kidding. But you know what I mean? That was more the hesitation was like, who's going to trust me? Like, I don't have this big agency background in content writing. I don't have any experience with the title director of communications. That was more what was holding me back. It was just like what I believed was the lack of quote unquote experience. But really, I had experience the whole time. It is just all about how you're positioning yourself and, your experience doesn't equate ability. And I think that is a huge misconception for any entrepreneurs is that, oh, well, I don't have 20 years in the field. That's okay. You don't need to. You just need to be a really good writer, coach, marketer, whatever you are. You just have to have the skill set. And that is something that took me a very long time to figure out. So that was more the hesitation, but I loved working for myself. So I just powered through. And like I said, I'm extremely organized and I'm one of the rare people that has both the big picture brain and small picture brain, which does liken itself to working for yourself. So I have to say that. So for me, it was much more the skill set.
That's great. I was very impressed when you said that you were both creative and organized. Usually those two things don't go together very well. That is a unique skill set. That's awesome. And so when you started up and you made that jump, despite a little bit of maybe that imposter syndrome that you just described, which I think is so incredibly common, were there any failures, again, quote unquote failures, or setbacks that happened along the way? And if so, what did you learn and how did you handle those?
Oh, yeah. So many setbacks. I think one thing was just the wrong clients, focusing on the wrong thing. When I went into it, I was like, oh, like I want to help small businesses like me. Even though my background was in life science, it just sounded exciting. I liked the concept of helping small businesses, but that was really, really hard because the market is so saturated for content and copywriters working in small business. And I also didn't have a network in small business. My network is in life science. So once I kind of failed forward with that concept and really focused on the industry that I was familiar with, that I was passionate about, that I have a good network in, then things started to come together much more. And now I just save space because, very candidly, working in my industry can be challenging and a little dry sometimes. So I just decided to save space for women entrepreneurs. About 30% of our business is helping women entrepreneurs with their LinkedIn and their like LinkedIn content and branding and that stuff, just so I can still feel that joy of helping women like me. But I'm not, totally, I'm pounding the pavement every single day to insert myself in a saturated market.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So that was one thing. What else? So the other thing that I always tell people is like, you have to invest in yourself. And I think in the beginning, I was kind of like spinning my wheels on Google. Like, how much do I charge for this? What do I do for that? But then once I started looking into coaches, that was super helpful. It did take me a few tries to find the right coach, who I believe Amy Posick of Women's Business League and Bold Moves Coaching. So it definitely took me a little time. The first few coaches were good, but just not like what I was looking for. So, and now I have a good cadence of, I've worked with her for a couple of years, and now we have some strategy sessions that we work together. So she really just helps guide me. And that's been very important too. So that's what I would always say to people is like, don't try and do it alone. Don't try and reinvent the wheel. Someone has done it before you. Use their skill set.
That is a very tough thing to really internalize and do for people. At least in my experience, a lot of entrepreneurs tend to be very independent.
Yeah.
And it's hard. It's excellent advice. And I've heard that running theme through the few interviews that I've had for this podcast and the guests that I've had on. And I love that advice so much because I think we tend to not think to lean on others. We want to do it all ourselves. Why do that to ourselves?
I know. Yeah. I know. I mean, I just like laugh looking back, like thinking about, I was Googling like what to charge. Like, oh my gosh. No. And I've done, and since then I've also joined networking groups, which has really helped. I did a mastermind with Amy, and now just getting myself out there more with larger networking groups or different and more niche networking groups in my world, which has just been wonderful.
That's great. And do you have a team that works with you, or are you a solopreneur?
I have a team, and that is actually how you and I met. My graphic designer partner is Melissa Dorsky Designs. She's wonderful, and she helps me with my marketing collateral and my Canva designs and really works in tandem with me and a couple of my clients. I have a wonderful administrative assistant that is a lifesaver. Her name is Stephanie Boyle, and her business is By Friday. And then I have a couple other main writers. Shout out to Michelle Hakunda and Melissa Hakunda, and Brian Reiser. Those are all people. The cool thing about the model that we have instituted is all these people have their own businesses. We are just collaborating, and they are on the LPC team for different partnerships, or, Stephanie works across my business, but all these people have their own businesses. So it's just been an awesome way to not only contribute to someone else's small business, but to have someone help me do the work, because now I can grow my business.
Exactly. Have you learned any hard or challenging lessons along the way about trying to take on too much yourself and having a need for the team? How did that process look?
I would always get so embarrassed when it was like midnight and my husband or my stepson would come into my office and be like, "You're still here?" Not like embarrassed, but I would be like, "Oh, they're right." Like, why am I still here? So that kind of opened my eyes a little bit, that like, just, I don't need to be in the office until midnight. For some people, that's an ideal time to work. Maybe once upon a time, that was an ideal time for me to work, but I was really just trying to get the work done. And I started to feel extremely burned out. And that was 2022 into 2023. I started to feel really, really burned out. And I love my business. So that was really disappointing to me, that I started to feel burned out. And obviously, my family's feedback of like, "You're still here," really kind of pushed me forward into hiring more people on my team and having more help. Michelle Hakunda has helped me from the beginning with one client, but then I started to realize, why just limit it to one client? Like, I can get help on a lot of other clients.
Absolutely. It's a scalable approach to be able to grow your business when you start to build a team. And it can sometimes be challenging to find the right fit, but it sounds like you found the right fit right away, and that's amazing. Do you have any tips for entrepreneurs who are trying to scale outside of that solopreneur role when hiring the team members or assistants to help them service their clients or move their business forward?
Yeah. And actually, I have to say, for some of the people I had write for me, like, it didn't work out. Some of the admins did not work out, and they're all wonderful people, just not my style. So when I met my admin, Stephanie, I just knew, because we jived so well. And I knew that if someone was going to be in my business, literally in my emails and my calendar. I needed to feel super confident with them. And now I feel like she is, like my kindred spirit. So that's one piece of advice I would say is like, you really want to look for not only skill set, but fit too. I mean, that's so important. And the other thing is, just know that first person that you hire, the first writer, it may not be your last writer. Just keep going, keep trying people. And that's where the contract model comes in so well, because you are not indebted to this person as your full-time employee. You can really test it out and say, okay, do one assignment for me. Do I like working with you? Let's keep trying more. You can really build that relationship in that. And that's actually how I started with a few of my writers is I was like, well, why don't you just test this thing out for me? And then the ones that did a really good job and I really jived with are still working for me today.
That's great. That's great. I know that definitely hiring can be a source of stress for some solopreneurs, and I like that advice a lot. The contract model is definitely something I've tried out in the past as well, and it works well. A little less permanent, so you can test the waters. Yep.
Exactly.
Awesome. All right. Well, this has been a lot of amazing advice, and it's been so great to hear your experience. I have one last little fun question for you. If you couldn't be an entrepreneur or a writer, what would you do? What would you do in an alternate universe?
Oh my goodness. Funny enough, I just found this Instagram account last night and it was a couple that manages a hotel in the mountains of Vermont. And that is something that we always talk about. So, I mean, you'd kind of still be like your own boss, but it is just a little bit of a different dynamic. So, and I sent it to John and my husband, and I was like, let's do this. This looks fun. Because we're also, I didn't mention this, but we're also Airbnb hosts. We have a house up in New Hampshire that we Airbnb out. And we really love doing that. And his business is property management. So I think in an alternate life, or maybe, if I get bored of this, that is something we'll consider doing is creating little, when you go on vacation and they have those cute little like cabin, like communities where you can rent a cabin. It's like a hotel room by itself, basically. And then the owners or the proprietors live like on a big country house on the campus. Yeah, that's what I would love to do, something like that.
I love that. And it does sound like that might not be a total alternate universe. That might be a reality at some point.
I know. So
awesome. Well, great. Thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate your time, and it was so great to hear all about your journey.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been lovely.
Awesome. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.